Marissa. Welcome to Goblins of Discord. So if you've been following this channel for a while, this might seem like it's coming out of left field, but I'm really excited because I'm finally merging my side quest, which is actually this channel. Like, this is Enneagram, mindset coaching, the subconscious mind, all of this stuff is my side quest. I'm finally merging it with my main quest, which is storytelling, writing, and I really love film. So in my previous life, before I got really carried away on my side quest, because I had so much healing to do. I won't get into my whole teary backstory, but I was very creatively blocked. Not like I always have ideas, but it was like every time I would sit down and write, I would end up crying, and it was like a whole fucking ordeal. I was a script reader, so that means that I used to read screenplays for some companies. And I worked at a film organization, and I ran storytelling workshops and stuff like that. You can use story to truly tap into, I think, the thing that exists on a profoundly deep level for all of us, and that's this cosmic narrative that we're all playing out. Like, I believe, anyways, that we're in some kind of cosmic simulation, and our Enneagram types, our archetypes, our trifix, our tri-type, whatever you want to call it, with and all of the various aspects that go along with that, that I won't get really into in this video. I believe that they create our story, our self-fulfilling prophecy. And when you become conscious of the self-fulfilling prophecy, the story that you are kind of a passenger to in some ways, which is also why I picked this movie for the first movie, is because this is about the role of the passenger. And I really think that once you dig into that part of yourself, regardless of what your type is, how you are in some ways a passenger to this narrative that your type is creating in real time, because our type interacts with it's like our unconscious mind, our subconscious mind, and our conscious mind, and it creates our reality. And when you begin to see these things, and it takes time, you'll start seeing some patterns and you won't see some of them until further down the road. This shit takes a while, but you transform yourself. And so I hope that this, I don't know, turns some lights on for people out there, whether you're a writer or not, whether you're a 9 or you're another type. So if you haven't already watched Get Out, then I urge you to, before watching this, because it will be full of spoilers for obvious reasons. And I already created a video for this where I used clips, so it would be easier to follow along, but YouTube just wasn't having it, so I just decided to re-record it from the top. So yeah, and I understand that Jordan Peele didn't make this movie about the Enneagram 9 experience, but interestingly, we do make our art through the subconscious lens of our how we view the world, and that really comes through in this film. And I do think that you can, you know, do it through the lens of another type as well. And I think many artists do that well, but I do think that there's always going to be that skew to your type. And so the self-fulfilling prophecy of 9 or 963, if you go in the tragic direction, would be to become the passenger. It would be the Get Out worst case scenario where he does get hijacked and becomes just a vessel for other people's agendas and desires and dreams. And the best case scenario is whatever you want the best case scenario to be as that type, where it's like, I'm individuating. What is my big dream? How do I locate all of that? Like, how do I manifest that into reality and sustain that? That's really how you work with your self-fulfilling prophecy. It's like knowing the tragic arc of your type, and then also knowing your power. Triple attachment and 9 is able to tap into the collective fears, the collective needs, the collective's emotional space, and bring people together and work together. And because it's kind of almost the tribal orientation in each center as well, then it has the ability to speak to the masses, to connect to the masses. Jordan Peele's he's either probably a 693 or a 963, probably a 6 if he's a comedian. Not that 9s aren't comedians, but likelihood. He seems like a fear type too. Jordan Peele's films also speak to people a lot. Like, they speak to a lot of people because he's tapping into those collective fears and also abilities and gifts, and the kind of tragedy and the grief that those types, 3, 6s, and 9s, can experience. You can really see this this cultural expression where almost it's like the inverse of the vessel. It's like you can go the pod person vessel version, right, which is the self-fulfilling prophecy in the worst direction. Hopefully this isn't like really offensive to people with this type, but then you can go positive vessel where it's like you become that transmitter for the collective. You become the vessel that shares these truths that need to be spoken and touched on. And so by the end, where does Chris land? Well, it's kind of a gray zone, to be honest, but I'll get there when I get there in a moment. But just as a refresher, or if you haven't watched it and you don't feel like watching it, the setup for Get Out is like basically about like a black guy going home to his white girlfriend's place to visit her parents, and then the racially loaded implications in that, on top of like what already goes along with like the fear of maybe like meeting um, a partner's parents, and like especially for attachment types, I think, which attachment type being 3, 6, or 9, where there's like, are they going to accept me? Will they like me? Will it affect my relationship if they don't? Like, are they going to be crazy? Is this the kind of family I'm going to be a part of? I think that that comes up a lot for again, like a specifically attachment types. He's like very much an embodiment of the 9. From there, we discovered that like the girlfriend's this diabolical temptress Karen, snatching black cuties to be hijacked by the consciousnesses of her eugenics body snatcher family and their dusty, grotesque elderly friends. But again, like I'm gonna be looking at this through the lens of type 9, and I do see type 9 and Chris in this film playing the passenger role, and we actually have him in one of the opening shots and ending shot actually, as a passenger. He's in the passenger seat while his assertive girlfriend is driving. And I especially see that passenger role with 963, 936. So again, like I said, triple attachment or adaptation in the gut, the heart, and the head center, because they're often attaching and adapting to, you know, what other people think, what is the opinion, what is the consensus, the energy, what I don't really want to get into conflict with these people, so I'm just going to sort of like take a back seat here. And then the image center wanting to be acceptable to society, or at least impressive, standing out, like valuable to society. So there's always this kind of adaptation that's happening. And what happens too is that as a 9, a core 9, I believe Chris is, and this is that he's adapting, he's merging, he's diffusing, and he's avoiding in the gut center, which is existence in itself on some level, the gut center, because it's like the life force, the vehicle for life force. And so I think again, this is why it's powerful. It's like he's coming in as this passenger because he gives away his power to attach, so to connect, to have a support system, a person to merge with, to feel safe with, to give him more definition, to feel comfort, and someone that he can feel he can be like in an inner peace or calm with. Like him being with her makes him feel calm or safe, right? Because we're all the bottom of all of our patterns is to feel safe. Like once you drop down to the very one of the most bottom levels, it's like kind of the same for everybody else. It's I have to be this way to exist. I have to be this way to feel safe. And I think that when people realize that the Enneagram system is actually like really a coping mechanism system, but is driving everything we do. So you don't have to make it about your identity, even though it creates all of these things that comprise our identity. It's not your actual identity. Chris is like not actually very an active character in this film. So, and sometimes like this is sort of like poo-pooed upon, I think, a lot with writing. He doesn't really step into action until close to the end. And I think that that's actually just really interesting because that is sort of how it is actually on a character arc level for 9s. Because often they have all of this repressed rage, this inertia, because they're withdrawn gut types, and they're also positive gut types, so they're always sort of hoping it'll just work out, hoping this conflict will just resolve itself, hoping they won't have to do this thing that they don't want to do, it'll just go away. And so like their sort of thing is like you have to find that life force, that thrust, that dynamism, that anger, that rage, that frustration, that lust, in order to fully metabolize, in order to fully atomize, in order to exist. And so that's kind of the path that he's actually on some level, is to assert himself into the world and fully take up space instead of allowing another person to take up his space and just ride him like a fucking pony, you know? So the dilemma that Chris is in is the nine dilemma. It's between loss of connection, peace. This is inner peace. I know nines hate this. It's not, you're not necessarily a peacemaker. It's like you want peacemaking in yourself, right? It's like, I just don't want to deal with this. I don't want to deal with this insane conflict. Like, I just want everybody to vibe. I just want it to be pleasant, you know? And so he's like torn between this wanting to keep this with his girlfriend, this safety net, this wanting to keep that connection, not be abandoned, and then being torn between his actual safety and what ends up being his life. And so this arc culminates in Act 3, becomes like a war for selfhood. It's like self being the driver or the passenger. The nine fight to retain ownership over their own life and their own feelings and actions and direction and meaning and significance and location. Or are they going to give it up to somebody else entirely? Because I do think that a lot of nines can feel like they've been hijacked by other people's like dreams and expectations, because on some level they have, and it's not necessarily the other person's will or even they have like any desire for that, but it's because of how nines relate to the world, is that they're connecting to you and what you're doing. And I'm not saying that nines don't have their own interests or their own like selfhood, but there's this abandonment that happens, and then there's this grief and rage and horror that occurs when they realize, oh my God, I went along for the ride. I don't even know how I got this far along on the map. I don't want to go here. I don't want to be with these people. I don't want to do this job. I don't even like my spouse. How the fuck did I get here? and then they have the get out moment in the midpoint, which I'll get into, where it's like, get out. So I think that nines know what that feels like. And I think that that's, I mean, I think that this film became popular because it's actually really fucking good. I've watched it many times, and I do think it touched on something deep, like deeply resonant for a lot of people in North America, that connected with Chris's struggle of like the black or even just not white on some level, and versus the white whole thing, of course, but on another level, it's also the nine struggle. And there's a lot of nines and nine fixers in this reality. Chris is almost undone by his Enneagram 9 coping mechanism, the passenger coping mechanism, just hoping things work out, hoping for the best, just merging, flowing, let other people sort of steer the ship. And then because of that, he began to be erased. His existence and his selfhood was abandoned. It was erased. He was almost completely erased from existence outside of just being a vessel. And I think that Chris is playing a 963, probably 9-wing 863, self-pres social, I think. And what I also found interesting was the camera aspect. So that's type 9 is like kind of an observer, and I think that's why they often relate to type 5, and sometimes type 4, is because they can feel like they're kind of having this sometimes artistic experience with the outside world, where it's like sort of they're in a fantasy world and then the outside world exists. And so, but that's not necessarily what they're actually doing like on the outside. So, and that's how our personality usually shows up, is our how we express and connect and disconnect and push away and, you know, interact with the outside world. And so what he's doing is he's using this camera as this sort of buffer, where he can stay connected to others, but he's sort of creating this barrier between him and them as like almost a protective mechanism. So nines want to stay connected to people, but often there needs to be some kind of distance to maintain a semblance of selfhood. And so sometimes that can just be when nines ghost. They just need to be alone for a while. They need to go read a book. They need to go do some kind of hobby. They need to just get away from people, is to create that distance. And other times it can be created through like what Chris is doing with the camera, where he's like sort of, he's present, he's there, but he's not really. He's like observing you through this kind of protective lens of the camera. And, you know, some people, sometimes that's like a guitar. Like sometimes I've noticed a lot, like nines, when they get sort of like agitated, they don't know how to connect, or there's too much attention or focus put on them. It's like they might pick up a guitar and start playing because, I don't know, they don't want to talk about themselves, or like they do. And then it's like this sort of coping mechanism to deal with like the sort of discomfort of that focus being on them. Vaping, smoking, like I said, can also just be like napping. I have to check some work emails, and then they just go lie there, lie on a couch away from family or something like that. So, and like nines are kind of like the eyes, like I said, in some way. And it's like they're peering out at other people, sort of like the five thing. But what Chris is doing in this film is he's taking the focus off himself and putting it on others through the lens of the camera. He's peering into their worlds. He's taking focus off self and kind of seeing what others are doing. And because nines often can define themselves through their how they're reflected back from other people, like this is an attachment thing. It's like, how am I seen through the eyes of other people? Um, I mean, we can all be curious about that for sure, but it's like a kind of pattern that's always running in the background. So what nines do is that they can outsource too much to other people and give away too much of their energy and power, and then they feel resentful and angry about it, where it's like, you didn't see me, um, or you didn't ask me enough questions, you didn't care about me, you didn't, I didn't really want to do this thing even though I agreed to it. And they're getting mad at the other person as if the person somehow uh, taking ownership over them. And sometimes it is that case if like the person's in an abusive relationship and has an abusive family and things like that. But a lot of the time, nines give away their power and then they get mad at the other person, but oftentimes the other person's like not even aware that the nine's doing that. Like this dynamic is kind of one-sided sometimes. So nines can get angry about being that audience. And I've heard it from a couple nines before where they've expressed like, I feel like I'm just an audience member. I feel like I'm just, people are just talking at me and I'm just supposed to witness. And then I've wondered, it's like, well, why aren't you participating? Why don't you say your location? But a lot, because nines are withdrawn gut types, they often want to be pulled out of the fog by another person. They want to be located. They want to be chosen. They want to be valued enough and connected with enough that they are located through the help of somebody else. And like I'm talking about like some kind of like deeper stuff that's going on with nines, and I'm not saying that nines don't know who they are, don't have their own interests or their own identity. It's not like that at all. This is just a coping mechanism, but it's something that if you're a nine, you will probably start to notice that you do. And what I think is actually also again super niney about this is like we first meet Chris, and the sort of once you get past the titles part of it, the opening shot of Chris isn't even Chris, it's his photos. So it's again, we're looking at the world, we're looking into his world through his eyes, through the outside world. So it's again like that sort of outward facing view of observing, like what the other world is how I define myself, like me through the lens of you. And when we actually meet Chris for the first time, when he comes into frame, he's obscured. He has his back to us. His the mirror in his bathroom is fogged up, and then he's wiping it. And I think that was actually like a beautiful metaphor for like nines trying to see themselves sometimes, trying to wipe off the steam. Like, who am I in the fog? Like that, yeah, that's me. I'm still there. Or that's what I look like. Um, and trying to wipe away those outside elements that can kind of like color the type, color the identity, where it's like, is that me or did I take on something from somebody else? And again, I know that not all nines will completely relate to this. I do see like this particular character as 963, and a lot of nine descriptions are centered towards triple attachment. So I know that like if you're like a 974 or a 962, you might feel like you have more of like a location or something like that. Um, but this is still the thing that nines are doing. It's just louder with 963s. And so then we're introduced to Rose, his girlfriend, who I think is like a three core, 314. She's like she's kind of like, I think like a Slytherin like 315 masquerading as a 316 Karen. So she's kind of or she's a very dark Karen, like a 316 with like sociopath part of her brain missing or something. I don't know. But not the 315s are necessarily sociopaths, but she's kind of got that reptile reptile person thing to her. And she's got the Like it's kind of like a colder affect, not taking on as much from other people, you know. And she's an assertive type, and so often nines, as withdrawn gut types, are attracted to assertive types, so threes, sevens, eights, or even reactive types like four, six, eight, because there's a location there. There's something going on there. This other person is, driving the car, and the nine is in the passenger seat, and we literally see that at the beginning where it's like he's like, I'm a little bit nervous, or what are they going to think about me? Do they know I'm black? And she's like, yeah, yeah, it'll be fine. And, positive withdrawn type, it's like, okay, I don't know that that's true, but I'm just gonna like go with the flow here. I'm not gonna ruffle feathers. I'll just hope it goes out for the best. And then he's trusting her to get him to the location safely, and she knows what's right. She knows what's best. And then, we have the scene with Rod, obviously. He's like, get the fuck out of there. He's joking, but he's also not joking because he's a six. And sixes, even though Chris has six in his type, core sixes are more like the detectives, right? They're like, they're skeptical. They're pointing out what other people are doing. They're reactive. So they're like, that person's probably lying. That person's lying. That person's like up to something. They have a hidden agenda. And so, Chris is lucky that he has the sixth friend of his going on in the background, working at the TSA to make sure that Chris isn't completely pod personed. And so we get these warning signs, and this is like kind of just like a classic movie thing that happens, where it's sort of like something's coming, Chris. And it's that warning. And symbolically, I know that this is also relates to the racial element, but it's also interestingly relates to the nine element where his assertive girlfriend accidentally hits a deer, a female deer. And I kind of see does like as nines because they have this like beautiful, receptive, innocent, kind of natural energy. Like there's something about deer that feels like very much spirit animal. Like it has that kind of deeper mystical element to it. And and it's almost like I think on some level he's seeing himself in that deer. I know that it also connects to his childhood trauma of his mom being hit by a car as well within the story narrative. And so I think that there's also that activation of abandonment, the fear of abandonment too. So I think that there's sort of like symbolically a little bit of overlap going on with all of that. But it's interesting too, then we go into the scene where the cop is there. And again, I know that this is a racially loaded scene about the cop wanting his ID and then setting up that she's defending him. But it's really because she doesn't want, obviously, him to have a record of his ID because she plans to take him out. But it's also an interesting interplay of nines and the assertive girlfriend. So it's like, because nine is kind of more of a feminine energy, like I'm not saying nine men are girly, but it's more of a receptive, like yin energy. And she's playing a three, which is more assertive yang energy. It's like getting shit done, taking charge. And oftentimes nines are attracted to that energy. Like I said, it's kind of in the shadow where it's like, I wish I could be more like that. That person will protect me, or that person's got something I don't have. And so they're filling in this space that I don't have access to. And by being with them, it will sort of create that for me. But it's actually very disempowering too on some level. So it's one of those kind of trades that you almost have to do with the balance, because then nines become resentful of the assertive that they're dating or the reactive that they're dating for being like that, but that's also why they're attracted to them. So it does speak to the shadow, and in Nine's shadow, how at least how I look at the shadow is it's in the wing, so it's like 8 or 1, and which is assertive and frustrated energy. So it's very much like taking charge, being bossy, getting what you want, stating your location, and yeah, she's taking care of business. And so yeah, and then I see this like in the conventional three-act structure as this is the catalyst. He arrives at the parents' house. Everything's all smiley and shiny, and they're not that scary, but he's kind of getting some intuitions that there's hints of something kind of creepy perhaps going on. And the father is, I don't know, he gives me Karen vibes too. And Chris is just sort of doing his best to navigate this situation. And he kind of, there's sort of that, a little bit of that fish out of water aspect that we have in Act Two, but I think that this is technically still before the Act Two break, and he's getting his bearings. He's there's kind of this you can still back out of this, right? Like you can kind of still turn around and get out of there if you want to. You're not like too deep in it yet. And the father is sort of talking about like this kind of assertive shit with the running, and like obviously it hints at what's to come for Chris, being used as like a vessel for somebody else's like assertive dreams, basically being used as like a tool. So this situation is what's going to force Chris to face his nine dilemma between self-erasure and fully existing, being a passenger or a driver in his own life. He doesn't realize this, of course, yet, but this is the trigger incident that sets off the story. This is sort of the setting up the last chance before it's too late sequences where it's like you can see Chris is like getting nervous. He feels like there's something happening to him on an instinctive, intuitive level where he's getting, he's getting nervous. They are asking him prying questions that also activate like this sort of trauma response. So for basically for every type, they're not going to really want to talk about their childhood trauma, like with their either person's like parents, like the first time they meet them. Like no one wants to do that. That's uncomfortable as fucking intrusive. But uh, it's interesting though that he sort of has this like, the coping mechanism, the self-soothing. It's like he's not smoking, so now he's got to sort of do something else to get that nervous energy out, but he doesn't want to do it. Like whereas a reactive type might be like, hey, like mind your own fucking business or something, but he's sort of just like, yeah, like, I don't really like to talk about it, kind of this thing. And then we cut to Georgina, who is their housekeeper, who's actually like a black woman that was seduced by Rose and then hijacked by her grandma. It's totally gross. But what actually happens in this scene is we're starting to see that reflection of the nine fear of no one's home. I'm just going along with these other people's agendas, and then this sort of like momentary lapse of like, what am I doing? I'm asleep. When she starts like pouring the iced tea. Oh, it's okay. Oh, I didn't mean it. It's like that kind of dissociation stuff that can happen to nine and lower levels of health, and also in trauma, because it's like how we respond to trauma is our type. So then when you're traumatized, you're going to do your type more, or you're going to do like the lower levels of health stuff. And then he gets reassurance from his girlfriend. He's like, I'm feeling like, I don't know, man, about this. And she's like, no, no, I know, I'm sorry. She validates his fear because she's a three. She knows what he needs to hear. They're adapting in the heart space. They know what you want. They see what you what you need, and they want you to come along for their agenda. So they'll speak to that to get you to go there. And this ability can be used for good or evil. You know what I'm saying? So, and we see obviously her using it for evil in this movie. And then again, it's that final warning. He's like, something's not right. He's given up. He's just, fuck it. I'm going to go have my smoke. I'm feeling stressed out. I'm feeling grief, or I'm feeling something. I'm feeling discomfort. And him going outside and having smoke is kind of an acknowledgement of that on some level, where it's like, I'm feeling something coming up. And what I find interesting is like, the I know again, like this is Walter running towards him, the groundskeeper running towards him, who is another like black person that Rose seduced and then was hijacked. He was hijacked by the grandpa's consciousness, who wanted to be a runner. So I know that connects to that, but it's almost like Chris's anger is running towards him. I don't know what this character's type is, but I kind of got 8 from it. Both at the beginning and at the end, there's like this kind of 8 energy that this actor has. So he might even be an 8 himself, but I think that he's playing an 8 wing 9 probably. But it's almost like his mirror image reverse as a 9 wing 8. It's like this guy is just running towards him at full speed, and I feel like it's almost like his anger coming towards him as he looks up, he sees Georgina looking at herself. It doesn't feel right. There's something off. He knows there's something off, and you can probably feeling this like passenger anger of being the passenger rising up inside of him, and it's running towards him. Yeah, and I think that like the grandpa thing was like his kind of his first get out, like get out, like before we get to the midpoint and there's an actual get out scream. It's like that to me was like sort of that first like get out, and right before we enter Act 2. And so Chris is still on his passenger program. He's still doing the Enneagram 9 like sort of he actually kind of in this act two break goes into like a nine fear on some level where it's like that I can be hypnotized, especially with a six fix. I can be hijacked. I can be hypnotized. I can be persuaded. And I think on some level there is a fear. I don't know. I'm sure that like 963s, 369, 693 will hate me saying this, but I think that there is some kind of fear that I've observed, anyways, of being a pod person because they can be so hijacked by other people's agendas so easily sometimes that I think that there is this conscious, semi-conscious fear of pod person, of like, I'm going to be a pod person. I got to hold on to myself for dear life because people can take me over. People can send me to the sunken place. People can take away my power, take away my sovereignty. And, in some cases, obviously they can, like physically, that sometimes this can happen. But I think that it's more of like a deeper running fear for this trifix in general, especially nines, because nines have so much grief and often they can have a lot of guilt too about the inertia, what the inertia has cost them. So sometimes nines, again, especially with 6, 6, 9, 9, 6, can feel like a lot of remorse for things that they didn't do, for things that they could have done differently. They made a mistake or they didn't take action, they didn't chase their dreams, and now here they are. And now what do I do? Now it's hopeless. So that kind of futility and hopelessness, I feel like, comes out in the scene where it's like, objectively, we know like he was a child. It wasn't his fault that like his mom died. It wasn't his fault that when his mom got in the car accident, he didn't act on it, that he just sat there and watched the TV because he was a kid. But because um because of his type though, there's going to be this guilt, like it's my fault. I did that. I didn't take action. And then that feeling of it's my fault, I didn't take action, and actually what it does to the subconscious and to the person who's struggling with that, it only intensifies the inertia and the fear of taking action because it becomes so sticky and so much resistance that it's almost like, well, when I do take action, then something even worse happens. And so this can happen to nines and nine fixers a lot, where there's just this like failure to launch or failure to um, locate the self and do something and keep doing it over and over because again it's the self erasure thing. It's and then they can give themselves away to other people's agendas and then get really mad at the other person. So I think that this is something to be mindful of as a nine, obviously, but also as not a not nine, to check in with your nines when and like actually hold space for them to um, like locate. Because sometimes you ask a nine, well, and then they just give you a, oh, I don't know, I'm okay. You gotta kind of wait for a few minutes to like, are you, like, what do you like? And you gotta make it feel safe for them to say what they're thinking because then the moment passes and then they feel like they lost the chance to say it. So, um, yeah, anyways, my little coaching uh, tidbit. And then we watch him drop into the sunken place. And that's the space where nine feels like they've lost themselves, like they're losing themselves to another person's agenda or the outside world, and they can't find their location. They can't figure out where they are. And then he wakes up and he's like, I guess everything's okay. That was really weird. I think your mom hypnotized me, but I guess maybe I'm overreacting. And that's again where they give their power away because it's like a reactive type would have been like, I'm getting the fuck out of here. Like Rod, for example, like his sixth friend would have been like, I'm out of here. Like you're taking someone's car or like gone running through the forest. Those are usually in the horror movies, the ones who end up getting like taken out first because they're the ones who like show their fear and like just bounce like a rocket, or they're the ones who survive because they got out quickly. Then we see the sequence of all these like creepy old white people showing up in their black cars, obviously metaphor of the white people riding in the the black like vehicle. Um, and that's also another, I think, like thing for nines is like feeling ridden by other people, like they're just being used again, like as some sort of expression for another person, or like I said before, like the audience thing. And then he's like, man, these people are weird. And he's being treated sort of like a meat market, like he's the token black boyfriend is how he's being treated, asking him all these like really rude questions, like making it about his being black, and he doesn't react in any way other than just sort of like, okay, okay. So it's a nine response is to just be like, all right. And that's again where they can self-erase, whereas somebody else might have been like, what you're saying is fucking rude, you need to like check yourself, asshole. He is it's like, all right, I don't want to cause a disturbance. I'm just going to let this person be a horrible person and move on with my day. And then he, I think at some point is like, I'm feeling stressed about this. So then he pulls out the camera and he's like, starts creating distance between himself and the other people as the observer. So it's like, again, that sort of self-protective mechanism of like, I'm still present and connected and engaging, but I'm not. It's like there's something between us, you know, and then he meets somebody who sees him, ironically, a blind guy who sees him for who he really is, an artist, a gifted person, an individual. So he feels this connection with this man where he finally feels seen, and again, ironically, through it by a blind man. And and on some level, actually, I just realized that's actually a really good metaphor again for nines, because nines often don't feel safe to be seen. I think that that can be an attachment type. I think threes have that too, but to be truly seen. And the man being blind makes it safe for Chris to just let his guard down because he's not really, he's being seen, but he's not being seen. And then again, we have the part where he's looking at the dad, Mr. Armitage, and it's kind of got the deer, what's it called? The rangefinder or whatever. Um, and he's looking at them, and it's almost like the roles are reversed. Like he's like looking at them as if they're like the prey, kind of the hunter and the deer versus vice versa. But then of course the dad flips it on him immediately and starts pointing at it. I see you, I see you. No, you're the prey. Like that's sort of the message. It's like I located you, I see you. And then Chris kind of, all right, I'm just gonna go over here now. But again, like he has like his intuition, because nines are very intuitive. His intuition is rising, but they don't express this intuition a lot. So then he, and then again, so he's like, he can't talk to his first place connection, right? His girlfriend about this. And then he goes to call his friend Rod, his six, like, tell me I'm like crazy. Like, I think there's something going on here. And of course, his phone's unplugged, disconnection, not connected to the outside world. And this is again a nine fears. Like, I can't connect to my support system, 963 specifically. I can't connect to my support system. And Georgina is the one who unplugged it. And then she's like, no, 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 no. I love the Armitages. They're so good to me. They're like family. And again, this is sort of a reflection of the nine thing, where it's like, we're connected. Like it can be the Stepford thing that nines can go into when they're stressed out, where they're like, it'll be fine. No, no, no. We're like family. Hey, we all care about each other. When you know something's wrong. This isn't try I'm not trying to make this a nine roast. I'm really trying to do this with love. So I hope this is how it's received. But he knows, he's like, there's something wrong. There's something wrong here. So he calls a six friend finally. His battery charges enough. And Rod's like, it's a sex slave situation. Get the fuck out of there. Because the sixes are worst case scenarios. And Chris has a bit of that, but it's like probably I almost think I think he's had last, is what he seems like in this film. So it's like 936. So he's like sort of accessing his head center through Rod, through the phone here. And he's like, no, no, I hear you. You're onto something. Get the fuck out of there. But then, you know, then Chris again reverts to the nine passenger thing. And this is actually a thing that I've witnessed happen with a lot of nines, nine sixes, six nines, where they're in a relationship that they don't want to be in, and then they whine to their friends, and then their friends are like, yeah, break up with that person. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, they suck. And then they go back to being with the person. And it's like, it can be very frustrating from the outside to be friends with somebody who's doing that. And because it's the attachment thing of like staying connected, not wanting to ruffle the feathers, not wanting, oh, now I have to start over again. I'm going to be alone. I'm going to have to figure things out on my own. And, you know, it can be, they can make a negotiation with themselves where their tolerance for bullshit will just continue to rise, um in a way to like almost self erase the anger, erase the like the what they truly know, which is I need to get out of this situation. This is the midpoint mirror part. So we're already in the midpoint sequence, but this tends to fall like usually in the middle of the midpoint sequence or somewhere about that. And often it is literally a mirror where the character looks in the mirror and they're like angry or crying, or there's some sort of, I don't know, thing that happens. And in this instance, the mirror is this other black man's eyes through the flash, because he comes into awareness, this jolt. It's like he's seeing his future, he's seeing himself reflected. The anger, the fear, the like, there's something wrong, get out. And what I like about this is that for a nine too, this makes sense because it's like he's seeing it reflected in another person instead of the actual mirror. And it's again, like I said, the fear of the pod person. It's like, am I becoming a pod person? And then the screaming true you inside that is like, let me out. Like I'm trapped in this job I hate. I'm trapped in this relationship, in this like life I've created for myself. I'm trapped. Get me out of here. And then we get to the part where everybody's like smoothing things over. It's fine. It's fine, Chris. It was totally normal. It was just a seizure. Everything's totally great. And then the nine's like sort of like gaslighting himself for like, yeah, like he knows, he's like, I gotta get out of here, but I'm not ready to run. I need to talk to my girlfriend about it first. And then obviously we hit the point in the movie where we're ending this sort of midpoint sequence where we're seeing the true intention. The stakes are raised and we discover what's actually going on. Yes, Chris is going to be hijacked by this creepy blind man who tricked him in exactly the same way. He was just being more sneaky about it. And now we reach the part after the midpoint. So it's like the aftermath, the consequences, where he has to rally. He has to do something. He knows he has to do something. He's seen enough to know that this isn't right. But he's not ready to change yet. He's not ready to fully individuate. He's not ready to sever his attachment to the girlfriend, his support system. He doesn't want to relive that abandonment aspect from his childhood and also just the nine fear. He voices his concerns, which is a big deal. And he tells her and how it activated his trauma, and he's expressing his feelings and he's blaming himself. And then what's happening is like he starts with that sort of like, I'm going to leave part, but then he goes back into self-abandonment because again, it like triggers this nine fear of him being abandoned, and then also projecting the fear that he's abandoning somebody else. He's going to feel really guilty about it. And again, this is like working with the six fix there as well, where it's like, he feels like, well, if I abandon her, then I'm responsible for her suffering and her pain, and that will cause me pain and all of that. Because nines are empathetic. Like unless you get a sociopath nine, which you could definitely get a sociopath nine, but he's clearly not one of them. So he's as a positive type two, he wants to see the best in her. He wants to believe that Rose cares about him still, and that she's not like her family, and that she's not part of whatever this thing is. But that's the fantastical element too of nine, where you can delude yourself. And she's a villainous three. She's a villainous, treacherous, low health three, and she plays on his emotions and says what he needs to hear. And so she validates his fears after he initially is like, I'm going to leave. And then she sees how she can sort of spin it to her advantage. And she's like, okay, we'll go home. And so now he feels relief because he's like, I was seen and I wasn't abandoned, and now we're going to go together. And so she gets his trust back. But then his fears start to become realized when he finds her like secret cupboard. He wasn't chosen, obviously, and this is a nine thing. Like nines want to feel chosen, and this is where this is where they relate to four too, is where they want to feel special, but they're sort of like seeking that from the outside world. It's like, I'm special, I'm chosen. I think maybe Rose said that to him, that he was her first black boyfriend, and so this is sort of this oh wait, she lied about that. And then, oh no, wait, that's Walter, that's Georgina. They aren't like they are in the photos. What does that mean about Chris? Does that mean that he is a vessel? He's replaceable? He's a passenger in somebody else's story? He's not in a partnership. He's a passenger in this other person's agenda in these other people's demonic plan. And so now we're hitting the pre-rock bottom where it's like really dawning on him now, and he's like, doing the nine thing of like, okay, not okay, I'm feeling overwhelmed, sensory overload. I don't know how to cope with this. So he's still not fully ready to individuate and be like, fuck this bitch, and just like knock her over and like fucking bolt, like take the keys from her and just get the fuck out of there. He's His anger is now starting to rise. He's starting to come into awareness of this fear and this anger and the self-abandonment, and that his girlfriend's like some dark triad psychopath. But he's still kind of hoping, I think, on some level that there's going to be an explanation, that she can like justify what she's done, and that they will leave, that he can still trust her even though he knows he can't trust her, but he's still going to do his nine pattern again, like I said. And he's not asserting himself yet. He's not reaching into the anger part where he's going to be like, I don't need you, bitch. Fuck all y'all are psychos. I'm getting out of here. He doesn't do that. He relies on his girlfriend to smooth over the situation, the assertive type, to smooth over the situation with the parents and lie to them about why they're going. And he just, yeah, he's like, he goes along with it. So again, he's still doing the nine thing of like, I need another person to speak for me. And then we get to the dark night of the soul part of this, where this is like, he realizes Rose is lying to him. And then the nine volcano happens, the eruption of all of the times that he has given away his power, he has trusted, he has been abandoned, he has put other people's needs first, he has not followed his own intuition, and then it's too late. It's too late. Now he's angry, but it's too late and he can't do anything about it. And his fear is realized. This is the rock bottom. He has been abandoned by his girlfriend, by his lover. And not only that, but now he is completely self-abandoned. The person who is supposed to care about him and protect him and meet him halfway, and especially as an assertive type, I think again there's this like outsourcing that happens with sixes and nines sometimes, where it's like, you'll be my protector. And she wasn't. She was his deceiver, and she was a villain. And he's all alone. He's rudderless now. He's rendered paralyzed. Now he's gone. He's disappeared into the sunken place. And now he's going to be at the beck and call of other people, people pleasing, struggling with boundaries, feeling permeated by every ripple, no control over how his life goes, over his actions, over what he wants. They're all going to be gone. And it's all been taken away from him at this point. And he's fallen back into the sunken place. And in some ways, he's already been in this place since he was a child. And I think in some ways, this is where nines are sort of hovering between the sunken place and like full individuation. But now his fate is sealed. Now he's dropped to the bottom. And I think that this is what it feels like for a lot of nines when they realize the life they're living isn't the one that they want to live, and they feel powerless to get out of that life that they've co-created with somebody else. Whether that's like their partner or in their job or with their family, going along with their family's shit. And then it's like, now I'm down here and I don't know how to get out. And so, yeah, now he's in this kind of like paralyzed state. He's held hostage. And we circle back to the deer from the beginning, that warning. But what I find interesting is that it's got antlers. It's a stag now. And so I think that represents his anger. And it's this anger that's rising inside of him, this fucking power that he has been ignoring while he's been in this sort of like deer, the doe state. It's now the stag energy that's coming out, because now it's like, he's being told by the creeper on the TV, like, one day you'll enjoy being a member of the family. It's kind of, I think it's like the nine fear of the pod person thing. And then the art gallerist is like, you won't be completely gone. A sliver of you will still be in there. You'll be able to see and hear what your body is doing, but your existence will be as a passenger, as an audience. You'll live in, and then he finishes the sentence, the sunken place. And this is the nine fear on some level, that I will always be the passenger. I will never be the one driving. I will never have enough force to keep this train moving alone and like in the direction by myself. And, obviously there are a shit ton of successful nines out there, but I still think that there's, even when they're in the driver's seat, I think that there can always be this sort of awareness of this, like negotiation process, or this sort of, I have to keep I have to keep making sure that I'm not going to fall down. I'm not going to become like somebody else's agenda once you start being conscious that that's like a pattern that you're doing until you've integrated it. Like it is possible. It's absolutely possible for every single person to integrate with their type while they're still the same type and they're still doing their pattern. They're doing it from like an empowered place because nines can use being a passenger to their advantage, and they do use being a passenger to their advantage all the fucking time. But that's a different movie that we'll analyze. So now we actually do see, though, to touch on that, the nine, probably numbing eight more than numbing one, but like the nine numbing superpower. And now he's like tapped into his rage and his grief and the self-abandonment and being taken advantage of. And now he's gonna go primal, like double gut mode. And this is where the volcano erupts like at a level where it's sustainable. So usually there's like an initial nine eruption, and then they kind of feel bad about it later, and they're like, or they just pretend it didn't happen. But now he's gotten like so fucking mad that he's going to do something about it. He's like finally mad enough about giving his power away that he's going to erupt. And then in the back, in the B story, we have Rod, and he's like doing his little six sleuthing. Thank God for Rod. So we get the aha moment in this third act sequence from Chris's rage, because he realizes his anger has caused the solution. He's picked apart the cotton batting in the armchair, the chair arm, and we don't see it happen as he's doing it, but it's like everything that he repressed and buried is starting to come out, and now it's like actually solving the problem for him, because now he has, and again, I know that this relates to like the slavery metaphor, but he's putting the cotton batting now in his ears so that he can't be hypnotized when they ding the teacup again. And I think that this also in some way speaks to the nine actually creating like a proper barrier. Okay, I'm not letting you permeate me anymore. I am not letting you fucking through me anymore. And the way that nines can do that is through fully embodying this power that they fear on some level. So now he makes that first, like, this is sort of the climactic sequence where he's like takes down the evil brother. He goes from passenger to driver. Now he doesn't need, he has no one left to support him. He has no one left to rely on. He can't contact Rob. The girlfriend's evil. So he's on his own now. He has to step into his power if he wants to stay alive. And he does that. And he bashes the skull in of this evil brother. And then he takes out the dad with the stag horns. Like, this is so beautiful for like him being like in his eight lust, vengeance, power, conquest, like primal fucking gut power. And then he does the dance with the mom, takes the mom out, and now we get to the last part. And this is sort of like almost in some weird way, like this last little choice where it's like he's in the chokehold, and it's like, are you gonna go back to sleep, Chris? Are you going to go back into the pod? Are you going to self-erase? Or are you going to fight through it? And then I think the guy triggers him when he starts saying like one Mississippi, two Mississippi, and then he's like, fuck, and then he like rallies. He's not going back to sleep. I avoided getting hypnotized again by the mom. I'm leaving. I'm out of here. I'm not succumbing anymore to these like hypnoses and these other people's agenda. And then he takes out the brother. And then he goes from being the passenger literally to the driver. He gets in that white hot rod, the kidnapper mobile, and he takes off. And he's driving now. He's driving. And in this moment, he's finally breaking his pattern. And of course, he's overdoing it in some ways, because that's what happens when you finally reach that volcano eruption. But it backfires, right? Because this is also what always happens. Like, I've made videos about this before on other channel, but I'll do one for the Enneagram. Maybe I'll do it this week while I'm thinking about it. But what happens is when you try to break your pattern, your type's pattern, what's going to happen is, it's like, I call it the Agent Smith effect. It's like Agent Smiths are going to come out of the woodwork and try to stop you. They're going to be like, nope, it's a bad idea. It's a really bad idea. And that's literally what happens to him, because then he hits Georgina. And of course, like, we know it's grandma's inside, but it's also still like this black woman who is also pod personed. And so Chris has this deep empathy and hope, like, still there. And also it triggers like his abandonment and like everything what happened with his mom being left for dead. And so he goes into the nine empathy thing. It's like he's angry, but now he feels like, ugh, like now I feel bad. I can't stay in this power, this energy of rage and anger. I have to help this chick in case I can like help her in case she is might still be in there, you know what I mean? But again, this is the matrix saying like, go back to sleep, sweetie. Go back to sleep. You're not ready to change your patterns yet. You have to stay attached. You have to still be in your nine empathy pattern. You can't really fully be in your anger yet. And then of course him going reverting backfires, and then she causes a car crash, um and now the girlfriend's figured out what's going on, Rose, and she's got her gun out and she's hunting him like a deer. She's gone full assertive predator mode, and he's prey again. She wants him to go back to sleep. She wants him put down. And this reinforces that message for the nine as he's like running away. He's like, if I step into my power, I will lose love, support, connection, and peace. Like he's going through that process of integration right now, like in this part of the movie where it's like he's facing his rage and then facing that abandonment fear. And so he runs from her. And then he's attacked by Walter, so the grandpa. He has like nothing left to fight except for his flash. He flashes Walter. Walter comes into awareness like the real man that's inside. He takes out the girlfriend, and she's not quite dead. And then he takes himself out. He blows his head off because he doesn't want to go back to that sleep state. Because I think this guy's probably like an 8-wing 9 or something. I think he's Chris's mirror, like actual type mirror. But so he blows his brains out, and he's like, no, I'm not staying a passenger. Fuck this shit. Chris doesn't have that level of resolve, I don't think, about that. So we're sort of seeing that mirrored back to him. And then he kind of has that final choice, um, where he can make a choice that might reflect his transformation through this experience. Like, will Chris take Rose out? Will he forgive her? Will he believe her creepy low health 3 attempts at deception? Will he do something else? So his anger rises inside of him and he wants to end her, but then she smiles. And at least I think this is what happens, is that Chris knows that if he strangles her, he'll become kind of like her. And in some ways he will go back to being a passenger, because it's like he goes to jail and then he's a different type of passenger, um, or he gets killed because he kills her and then his life is gone. So he's sort of in a rock and a hard place with this decision, because you can't beat those people with the same game. And I think as a 9, he doesn't want to anyways. And I don't think that his character arc would really make sense that he kills her. Like, I don't think that that's the arc that makes sense. And so I'll just assume that this is sort of like he's accessed his shadow now, that 8 bloodlust, and he's kind of like maybe potentially seen that he can step into the driver role of his life, but he doesn't have to resort to domination and cruelty, which is often what like kind of Nine's fear on some level, I think, from the assertive shadow. And then the resolution, we come, and then he's sort of faced with that fear from the original, the beginning of like, related to like race, like, am I going to be, is something going to happen now because of my race, something bad going to happen to me? But it's actually his friend finds him. So this is again the 9 thing of like, he was found. His 6th friend didn't abandon him at all. He found him somehow. He found where he was, and Chris was chosen. Chris was rescued. Someone did care about him after all that, and he didn't have to resort to anything that he would regret. And I think on some level, this is a beautiful metaphor for how 9s feel sometimes, like that they need to be found by another person, like pulled out of the ether and given direction and rescued. Um, and then the friend is obviously like a 6 who is getting off on the fact that he was right. This is such a like perfect like little B plot. Like, I'm telling you, don't go to her house. Like, I told you so. Like, such a like clean 6 character resolution. Consider the situation handled. My kind of reflection on this is that now Chris is back in the passenger seat, and I don't know, I think he knows it. You can't really tell. I like that this was left open and ambiguous. Like, is he going to stay a passenger? Is he going to change? Is he going to seek something else out in his life, or is he going to keep with this pattern? We don't really know. Obviously, he's fucked up from the battle he just did, so it makes sense for him to be in the passenger seat. But I think on a metaphorical level, I think that this is suggesting that Chris is going to just go back to being a passenger, and that he avoided becoming like an actual passenger, but for what maybe? is he going to go back to sleep in other ways? Is he going to find definition and begin driving his own car? You know what I mean? Driving the vehicle of his own life? Or was he just further disappointed and he's just going to kind of go back into the fog and then seek somebody else to maybe fill that need, and then the same thing will happen. Maybe not being hijacked by a bunch of like crusty old white creepers, but so I think that that's something interesting to maybe just reflect on a story perspective. I'd be curious to hear what people think. If you have a thought on what this might suggest for him and his Enneagram patterns after this film. But I just thought it was an interesting image to end on because it does go back to the passenger thing of the nine. And I think that sometimes this is also just what happens with nines, is that they do access their rage and their location and they muster and they do this big thing, but then they can go back to that baseline. So it's like they can rally when they have to, and then they can go back into that fog if they're not careful. So anyways, I hope that you enjoyed watching this. I would love to hear your thoughts below. And yeah, I'll be doing these frequently, so subscribe and stay tuned if that interests you. And like I said, again, you can get Type by Me coaching. Click below. Bye.